The text came through at 6:47 on a Tuesday evening. I was sitting on the kitchen floor with my 6-year-old son Noah, helping him glue cotton balls onto a paper cloud for his first-grade science project. My phone buzzed against the counter. It was my sister, Sloane. "Hey, so Mom and I talked. Barrett's parents are coming to the engagement dinner Saturday. His father runs, like, an entire hospital network. Very traditional family. Very image-conscious. We just think it would be better if you didn't come. You know how you are. We love you, but we can't risk it. Don't make this weird." I read it twice. Noah tugged my sleeve. "Mommy, does this cloud look real?" I looked at his little creation, cotton balls bulging in every direction like a storm system, with a personality disorder. "It looks perfect," I said, and I meant it. Because right then, that lumpy cotton cloud was the most honest thing in my world. Have you ever been erased by the people who were supposed to love you first? If you know that feeling, you are not alone. Drop a comment and tell me your story. I want to hear from you. I didn't reply to Sloane. I set the phone face down on the counter and went back to the cotton balls. But my hands were steady. My breathing was even. Because anger is a luxury I stopped affording a long time ago. I learned to convert it into something far more useful: clarity. Let me explain. 9 years ago, I was 23, and in my second year of medical school at one of the best programs in the state. Top of my class. The kind of student professors wrote recommendation letters for without being asked. Then I got pregnant. The father, a fellow student named Derek, told me calmly over coffee that a child would derail both our trajectories and that he had already researched clinics. When I told him I was keeping the baby, he blocked my number within the hour. I told my parents over dinner. My father, Martin, set down his fork with the precision of a man defusing a bomb. He looked at me the way you look at a stock that just crashed. "This is a catastrophic decision, Claire," he said. "Not Claire, honey. Not sweetheart. Claire." Like I was a client he was about to drop. My mother, Vivian, didn't even make it that far. She burst into tears and asked what she was supposed to tell the women at the junior league luncheon. My sister Sloane, who was 18 at the time, just stared at me with a look I would later recognize as the first draft of contempt. "You had everything," my father said quietly. "And you're throwing it away for what? A feeling? A principle?" He shook his head. "If you do this, you are on your own. I'm not funding a mistake." He meant Noah. He called my son a mistake before he even had a heartbeat. So he left. I transferred to a different medical school 3 states away, one that offered housing assistance for students with children. I delivered Noah during finals week and took my pharmacology exam 48 hours later with stitches still healing and breast milk leaking through my scrubs. I graduated on time. Not at the top of my class anymore, 4th. But considering I did it while raising an infant alone, working night shifts at a walk-in clinic, and eating ramen 5 nights a week, 4th felt like a throne. My family never asked where I went. They assumed I dropped out. My mother called once, about a year after I left, and I told her I was working at a clinic. That was technically true. It was a trauma center at a level 1 hospital where I was completing my surgical residency, but she heard clinic and filled in the rest. Her daughter, the failure, answering phones somewhere sad and fluorescent. They built an entire mythology around my downfall. To my parents, I was the cautionary tale, the one who had it all and threw it away for a baby. Sloane became the golden child by default. She was beautiful, ambitious, and unburdened by anything resembling a conscience. She worked in marketing for a luxury real estate firm, the kind of job that sounds impressive at cocktail parties but mostly involves Instagram posts and client dinners. She was dating Barrett Kincaid, whose father, Richard Kincaid, had built one of the largest private hospital networks on the East Coast. The engagement dinner was this Saturday at the Langford, the most exclusive hotel in the city, black tie, invitation only, and I was not invited. Here's what my family did not know. After finishing my residency, I was recruited by a fellowship program in cardiothoracic surgery, one of the most competitive specialties in medicine. By the time Noah turned 4, I had been published in 3 major medical journals. By the time he started kindergarten, I was appointed the youngest chief of cardiothoracic surgery in the history of Ridgemont Medical Center, the flagship hospital in our state's university system. I operated on hearts for a living, not metaphorically. I literally held people's hearts in my hands and decided whether they would beat again. 2 years ago, Senator Catherine Aldridge's husband collapsed during a campaign fundraiser. Massive aortic dissection, the kind that kills 80% of people before they reach the operating table. He was airlifted to Ridgemont. I was paged at 2 a.m. I left Noah with my neighbor, drove through a rainstorm, and spent 11 hours in surgery rebuilding the man's aorta with a graft technique I had modified from a procedure I developed during my fellowship. He survived. He walked out of the hospital 3 weeks later, Senator Aldridge called me personally the day he was discharged. "Dr. Donovan," she said, and her voice cracked in a way that told me she had been holding herself together for weeks. "You gave me back my husband. I will never forget that. If you ever need anything, you call me." I didn't call. I didn't need favors. I just needed to do my job and raise my son. But the senator and I stayed in touch. She invited me to policy dinners. She asked my opinion on healthcare legislation. She introduced me to governors, commissioners, hospital board chairs. I became someone whose name was spoken in rooms I never entered. And my family had no idea. The rare times I saw them, a Thanksgiving here, a brief Christmas visit there, I drove my old Honda Civic. I wore jeans and a sweater. I let my mother cluck her tongue at Noah's scuffed sneakers while my actual house, a 4-bedroom colonial in the best school district in the state, sat empty and waiting. I let my father ask if I was still doing that receptionist thing at the clinic. I let Sloane offer me her old handbags with a pitying smile that made me want to perform surgery on her ego. I let them believe what they wanted, not because I was ashamed, because correcting them would have meant I still needed their approval, and I had stopped needing that the night my father called my son a mistake. But Sloane's text changed the equation. Not because she excluded me. She had been excluding me for years. It was the phrase, "we can't risk it," like I was a liability, like my existence was a variable that might destabilize her perfect evening. She wasn't just keeping me out, she was protecting a brand, and she was using my own family as the security team. I stared at the ceiling that night after putting Noah to bed. He had asked me to tell him a story about a brave doctor who saved a dragon with a broken heart. I made one up, and he fell asleep smiling, his hand curled around my finger. I sat on the edge of his bed for a long time, watching him breathe. Then I picked up my phone and called Senator Aldridge. "Catherine," I said, "I have an unusual request." "Name it." "Are you free Saturday evening?" "I have a fundraiser at the Langford." "Why?" My pulse didn't quicken. My breath didn't catch. I just smiled. "I think I'd like to attend." She laughed. "Claire, you have a standing invitation to every event I host. I'll have a table reserved. Bring Noah. Gregory has been asking about him." I spent the rest of the week in surgical mode. Not in the operating room, in my closet. I called a personal stylist I had used once for a medical gala. She brought a rack of gowns to my house. I chose a midnight blue floor-length dress, the fabric so dark it looked almost black until the light caught it and revealed a deep, shifting sapphire. Simple. Architectural. The kind of dress that doesn't scream wealth, it whispers power. Noah watched me try it on, sitting cross-legged on my bed. "You look like a queen, Mommy." "I feel like one, baby." "Are we going to a castle?" "Something like that." I got Noah a miniature navy blazer and a pair of little dress shoes. He practiced his handshake in the mirror for 20 minutes, extending his hand with the seriousness of a diplomat. I watched him and felt something shift in my chest, not the cold clarity I had been carrying all week, but something warmer. This wasn't about revenge. This was about teaching my son that the people who try to make you invisible only succeed if you let them. Saturday arrived. I pulled into the Langford's valet circle at 6:45 p.m. The valet opened my door and paused. He recognized me. Not from magazines from the hospital. I had operated on his mother's mitral valve 18 months ago. "Dr. Donovan," he said quietly, his eyes wide. "It's good to see you." "Thank you, Miguel. How is your mother?" "She's dancing again. Because of you." I squeezed his hand and walked inside with Noah's small fingers wrapped around mine. The Langford's grand ballroom occupied the entire second floor, divided into sections by frosted glass partitions and living greenery. On the east side, Senator Aldridge's healthcare policy fundraiser was in full swing. State legislators, hospital executives, and donors mingling under crystal chandeliers. On the west side, separated by a wide marble corridor, was the private dining room reserved for the Kincaid-Donovan engagement dinner. 2 worlds, 1 building, and I was about to collapse the wall between them. Catherine spotted me immediately. She crossed the room with the purposeful stride of a woman who had won 3 elections by never wasting a step. "Claire, you look absolutely stunning." She hugged me, then crouched down to Noah's level. "And who is this handsome gentleman?" Noah extended his hand with practiced solemnity. "I'm Noah. I'm 6. My mom fixes hearts." Catherine's face softened. "She certainly does." We were seated at the center table, not by accident. Catherine had placed me directly beside Dr. Richard Kincaid's empty chair because Richard Kincaid, Barrett's father, was also attending the fundraiser before heading to his son's engagement dinner on the other side of the building. This was the part my family didn't know. Richard Kincaid had been trying to schedule a meeting with me for 4 months. His hospital network was negotiating a partnership with Ridgemont Medical Center, and I was the physician whose surgical program he wanted to acquire. My department, my team, my research. He had sent 3 formal requests through my hospital's administration. I had declined all of them. Not out of spite, I simply wasn't interested in corporate medicine. But tonight, Richard Kincaid was going to meet me. And he was going to meet me in front of my family. I was halfway through a conversation with the state health commissioner when I saw them. My parents entered through the main lobby. My father first, in a rented tuxedo that fit him like ambition, fits a small man tight in the wrong places. My mother followed, her hair swept up in an elaborate arrangement that must have taken hours. Sloane came next, draped in a white silk gown, clinging to Barrett's arm like he was the last lifeboat on the Titanic. Barrett looked handsome and mildly bored, the expression of a man who had attended so many of these events that elegance had become tedious. They were heading to the West Corridor. To reach it, they had to cross the open marble foyer that ran directly past the fundraiser, directly past my table. I didn't wave. I didn't stand. I just took a sip of water and waited. My mother saw me first. She was scanning the fundraiser crowd the way she always scanned rooms, cataloging who was worth knowing and who was decoration. Her eyes swept past me, then snapped back like a rubber band. Her mouth opened slightly. She grabbed my father's arm. I watched the information travel through my family like a current. My mother whispered to my father. My father squinted. Then his face went through a sequence I will remember for the rest of my life. Confusion, recognition, irritation, and finally, something that looked like fear. They stopped walking. Sloane, who had been laughing at something Barrett said, noticed the halt and followed their gaze. When she saw me, her smile didn't fade. It shattered. "Claire?" My mother's voice carried across the marble, thin and brittle. "What are you doing here?" I didn't stand. Catherine Aldridge did. She rose from her chair with the slow, deliberate grace of a woman who understood exactly what was happening and had chosen a side. "You must be Vivian," Catherine said, extending her hand. "Senator Catherine Aldridge. I've been looking forward to meeting Claire's family. She is one of the most remarkable women I have ever known." My mother shook the senator's hand mechanically, her eyes still locked on me. "Senator, I didn't realize you knew my daughter." "Knew her?" Catherine tilted her head. "Claire saved my husband's life. She is the finest cardiothoracic surgeon in this state, perhaps in the country. Ridgemont Medical Center is lucky to have her as their chief of surgery." The silence that followed had a physical weight. I could feel it pressing against the marble walls, settling into the chandeliers, filling the space between my family and the truth like concrete. My father stepped forward. His face had gone the color of old paper. "Chief of surgery?" "Good evening, Dad," I said, my voice calm and level. "Happy to see you." "This is Claire, what is she talking about? You work at a clinic. You told us." "I told you I worked at a clinic 9 years ago. You never asked again." Sloane pushed forward, her white dress catching the light in a way that suddenly looked less bridal and more like a surrender flag. "This is ridiculous. Claire dropped out of medical school. I transferred," I said. "I completed my degree. I finished my residency. I was board certified in cardiothoracic surgery 3 years ago. I have performed over 600 open heart procedures. I published a paper last year that changed the standard of care for aortic valve replacement nationwide." I paused. "But you wouldn't know any of that, because you never asked." Noah was coloring quietly at the table, perfectly content. He looked up at the commotion, saw my parents, and waved. "Hi, Grandma." "Hi, Grandpa." My mother's hand went to her mouth. She hadn't seen Noah in over a year. He had grown. He was wearing his little navy blazer and his serious face. And he looked so much like me at that age that I could see the recognition hit my mother like a physical blow. "Noah?" she whispered. "Oh, sweetheart. We're at a fancy dinner," Noah informed her solemnly. "Mommy's friends are really nice. That man over there is a senator's husband, and he taught me how to fold a napkin into a swan." At that moment, Richard Kincaid arrived. He was a tall man with silver hair, and the kind of presence that reorganizes a room just by entering it. He walked directly to our table, nodded at Catherine, and turned to me. "Dr. Donovan," he said, extending his hand. "I have been trying to get a meeting with you for months. Your work on minimally invasive valve repair is extraordinary. I read your latest paper twice." "Mr. Kincaid," I said, shaking his hand, "it's a pleasure to finally meet you." Barrett, who had been standing behind my sister like a well-dressed shadow, suddenly went rigid. "Wait, Dad, this is Dr. Donovan? The Claire Donovan? The one I've been trying to recruit for our cardiac center, yes." Richard looked at Barrett, then at Sloane, then back at me. "I didn't realize you were Barrett's fiancée's sister." "They don't really talk about me," I said, and I let the sentence sit there, unadorned, like a scalpel on a sterile tray. Richard Kincaid was a businessman. He could read a room the way I could read a cardiac rhythm. He looked at my father's ashen face, at my mother's trembling hands, at Sloane's furious blush, and he understood everything in about 3 seconds. "Well," he said carefully, pulling out the chair beside me, "I'd say this is long overdue. He sat down. At my table. Not at his son's engagement dinner. At my table. My father stood frozen in the marble corridor, caught between two gravitational fields: the engagement dinner he had orchestrated to climb one rung higher on the social ladder, and the daughter he had thrown away, who was now sitting at the center of everything he aspired to reach. "Martin," my mother whispered urgently, tugging his sleeve. "Martin, say something." My father cleared his throat. The sound was dry and hollow, like a door closing in an empty house. "Claire, this is wonderful news. Why didn't you tell us? We would have supported you. We're your family." I set down my water glass. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "Family," I said, testing the word like a surgeon probing a wound. "You told me I was making a catastrophic decision. You said you wouldn't fund a mistake. You let me walk out the door at 23 with nothing. And for 9 years, you did not once call to ask how I was. Not how Noah was. Not whether I finished school. Not whether I had food in the refrigerator. You assumed I had failed because that was the story that made Sloane's success feel bigger. I was the dark background you needed to make your golden child shine." My mother's tears started. The quiet kind. The kind she used like currency. "Claire, that's not fair," Sloane said, her voice climbing. "We tried to include you. You're the one who pulled away. You're the one who—" "You texted me 4 days ago," I said, "telling me not to come tonight because I would embarrass you. I have the message. Would you like me to read it aloud?" Sloane's mouth closed. Richard Kincaid set down his cocktail and looked at Barrett. The look was brief, surgical, and devastating. Barrett understood it instantly. His father was reassessing the entire alliance. Not because Sloane had done something wrong at the dinner table, but because the family she came from had thrown away the most valuable person in the room and didn't even know it. "Dr. Donovan," Richard said, turning back to me with a warmth that was genuine and also, unmistakably, strategic. "I came tonight hoping to discuss the partnership between Kincaid Health and Ridgemont. Your surgical program is the centerpiece of that deal. Without your department's participation, there is no acquisition. I want you to know that whatever you decide, I respect it completely." He paused, glancing at my father. "I also want you to know that I believe a person's character is revealed, not by how they treat people who can do something for them, but by how they treat people they think can do nothing." The words landed like a diagnosis no one wanted to hear. My father's face crumbled, not dramatically, not like a building collapsing, but slowly, like paper absorbing water. The realization spreading through him that his daughter held the key to the deal his future son-in-law's family was pursuing, and he had spent nearly a decade treating her like a write-off. Sloane turned to Barrett, searching for an anchor. But Barrett wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me, and in his eyes I saw something I recognized. The quiet recalculation of a man realizing the ground beneath him was not as solid as he thought. "Claire," my father tried again. His voice had changed. Softer now, smaller. "If I'd known—" "That's the point, Dad." I stood up. "Not because I was angry, because I was finished. If you'd known I was successful, you would have treated me differently. Which means your love was never about me. It was about what I could reflect back onto you. That's not love. That's accounting." Noah looked up from his coloring. "Mommy, can I show Grandma my swan napkin?" I looked at my mother. Her mascara was running. Her perfect hair was starting to wilt under the weight of what was happening. She looked old in a way I had never seen before, not physically, but existentially. Like a woman seeing the invoice for a debt she forgot she owed. "Not tonight, sweetheart," I said softly, running my hand over Noah's hair. "We'll see Grandma another time." It was a lie. We both knew it. I turned to Catherine. "Thank you for a lovely evening, Senator." Catherine nodded. "The pleasure was entirely mine, Claire." I turned to Richard. "Mr. Kincaid, I'll have my office schedule that meeting. Monday works." Richard stood and shook my hand. "I look forward to it." I gathered Noah's coloring supplies, helped him into his coat, and took his hand. We walked toward the lobby, past the marble columns and the crystal chandeliers, and the arrangements of white orchids that probably cost more than my first month's rent in medical school. Behind me, I heard Sloane's voice, sharp and fractured. "This is insane. She did this on purpose. She set this whole thing up to ruin my engagement dinner." Richard Kincaid's response was quiet, but carried with the acoustics of marble. "Sloane, she was here before you arrived. She was invited. You were the ones who stopped at her table." I didn't turn around. Noah swung my hand as we walked. "Mommy, that was a really fancy place." "It was. That man said you fix hearts. Is that true?" "That's what I do, baby." "Do you fix broken ones too? Like if someone's feelings are hurt?" I looked down at him. 6 years old and already asking the questions that take most people a lifetime to even consider. "I try," I said. "But some hearts don't want to be fixed. And that's okay. You can't force someone to heal." He thought about this for a moment. Like when Tommy at school won't say sorry even though he knows he was mean? Exactly like that. So what do? You walk away. And you find the people who are kind without being asked. He nodded, satisfied with this answer in the way that only a 6-year-old can be completely, without reservation, without the adult need to complicate simple truths. We drove home in comfortable silence. Noah fell asleep in the back seat, his swan napkin clutched in one hand and his blazer bunched under his cheek like a pillow. I watched him in the rearview mirror and felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Not vindication, not triumph. Just the deep, settled peace of a woman who had stopped performing her life for an audience that never bought tickets. My phone started buzzing before I even pulled into the driveway. I didn't look at it. I already knew what it said. My mother, crying through a text. Claire, please call us. We can fix this. Your father didn't mean those things. My father, formal even in desperation. We should discuss this privately. Call me. Sloane, alternating between fury and panic. You ruined my engagement dinner. Also, can you put in a good word with Barrett's dad? I carried Noah inside, still sleeping, and laid him in his bed. I unlaced his little dress shoes and pulled the blanket up to his chin. He murmured something about swans and castles and smiled in his sleep. I sat in the hallway outside his room for a long time. The house was quiet. Not the heavy, suffocating quiet of a woman trying to survive, but the gentle, breathing quiet of a home that was full. Full of finger paintings on the refrigerator. Full of plastic dinosaurs on the bathroom counter. Full of a boy who thought his mother was a queen and never once needed her to prove it. I picked up my phone. 17 missed calls. 9 texts. 1 voicemail from Sloane that I could tell, even from the preview, was half screaming and half begging. I opened the family group chat. It was called the Donovans. The profile picture was from Sloane's birthday 4 years ago. I wasn't in the photo. I had been in the kitchen, cutting the cake nobody asked me to cut. I tapped the settings icon. I pressed leave group. I watched the thread disappear. Then I set my phone on the nightstand, poured myself a glass of water, and sat by the window. The moon was out. The oak tree in the backyard cast long, quiet shadows across the lawn. Somewhere in this city, my father was sitting in a rented tuxedo, realizing that the daughter he discarded was the most powerful person he had ever met. Somewhere, my mother was rewriting history, telling anyone who would listen that they had always been close, that Claire was just so busy with her important career. Somewhere, my sister was Googling my name and discovering 9 years of accomplishments that existed in a world she never bothered to look at. And somewhere, in a bed down the hall, a 6-year-old boy was dreaming about castles and swans and a mother who fixed hearts. 3 months later, the Ridgemont-Kincaid partnership was finalized. I negotiated terms that protected my department's autonomy and secured funding for a pediatric cardiac program I had been designing for 2 years. Richard Kincaid called me the morning the deal closed. Claire, he said, you are the toughest negotiator I've ever sat across from. And I mean that as the highest compliment. Barrett and Sloane's engagement was called off 6 weeks after the dinner. I didn't ask why. I didn't need to. The Kincaid family valued substance. Sloane had built her entire identity on surface. The math was never going to work. My father called once more, about a month after the engagement ended. He left a voicemail. His voice was tired, deflated, stripped of the authority he used to wear like a tuxedo. Claire, I know I don't have the right to ask, but your mother isn't well. She's been having chest pains. The cardiologist at Street Luke said she might need a valve procedure. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but you're the best. Everyone says so. And she's still your mother. I listened to it twice. Then I called Street Luke's, spoke with my mother's cardiologist, reviewed her imaging, and sent a referral to Dr. Patel, my most trusted colleague, a surgeon I had trained personally, someone who would take care of her the way I would take care of any patient. But I didn't go myself, not because I was being cruel, because I had learned that you cannot operate on a heart that refuses to recognize it's broken. My father never called again. Last I heard, my mother's surgery went well. Sloane moved to another city, presumably to build a new identity in a place where no one knew the old one had collapsed. My parents sold the house they used to host their junior league dinners in and moved somewhere smaller. And me? I kept fixing hearts. I kept publishing research. I kept driving Noah to school every morning and reading him stories every night, and building a life that didn't need an audience. Senator Aldridge offered me a position on the state health board. I said yes. My name appeared in medical journals, on hospital letterheads, in policy documents that would shape healthcare in this state for decades. None of it was revenge. That's what people always get wrong about stories like mine. They want the big confrontation to be the climax, the moment the villain falls and the hero stands tall. But the real victory isn't the night you walk into the ballroom. It's every quiet morning after. It's the lunchbox you pack. It's the bedtime story you tell. It's the life you build so solidly, so completely, that the people who dismissed you don't haunt your thoughts anymore. They just become strangers whose faces you used to know. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't prove them wrong. It's simply stop needing them to see you at all. If this story hit close to home, if you've ever been the invisible one, the one they counted out, the one they thought would never amount to anything, I want you to know something. You are not what they see. You are what you build when no one is watching. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Like and subscribe to Flame of Revenge for more stories. And remember, the best revenge isn't loud. It's just living well, on your own terms, in your own light, until the silence says everything you never had to.